For today's review, we are looking at Superman from the Black Adam Page Punchers wave, and since we already know Superman's origin story, because it's been retold countless amount of times, I'm not going to read the information on the back of this data profile card, because I have read this information in the past with other reviews, so yeah, this is the same exact read-up, and there's the front side, same artwork, so there is the data profile card. And let's jump into the accessories that are included with this figure. He only comes with two accessories in the form of interchangeable hands, and of course it is the flight hands, as I like to call these. And there they are. These are the same exact hand gestures we have seen before with other Superman figures Mcfarlane Toys has released in the past, and there is nothing special to them. So there you go. There are the two hands. And this one actually has two fist hands as well, which is great because, sometimes with certain Superman figures Mcfarlane Toys has released, for some reason, he gives them a single fist hand and a single item molding hand, and no, two of each hand gesture. I don't know why he does that, but he does. So in this case, I'm glad this Superman has two fist hands because it's good for action poses. Now, in terms of the figure stand, he does come with a flight stand, which is actually good because, for some reason, sometimes certain figures based on characters that can fly as one of their abilities don't come with flight stands. I'm actually glad that we got this over the regular DC stand. So there is that. And of course, since this is a page puncher, he does come with the comic book. As you can see, it is the same comic book cover. Everything inside is the same, right? Same story. So there is that whole thing. And that is the comic book right there. And let's talk about the figure and its aesthetics now. So as you can see with this Superman figure, he has a very different color tone when it comes to his costume. It's very dark and it's not the bright, vibrant colors that most of us are familiar with when it comes to Superman, because every time we see the character, he always wears like these bright red, blue, and a little bit of the yellows, right? But for this one, it's not exactly those colors. And I think the reason why it looks this way is because it's supposed to match the artwork on the comic cover here. As you can see with the colors, it's like kind of dark for most of the characters' designs on this cover art. So I think that's what they were trying to go for, which, it works in a sense for this page puncher wave. But in terms of a Superman that you would want to be your main Justice League Superman, this is not the Superman figure for that sort of purpose. Now, this particular figure, in my opinion, is probably the weakest release in this wave, mainly because there are some parts of this figure that just looks really strange to me. Like, the proportioning is just really off when it comes to how it should have been sculpted. So let's talk about that first. So the first thing that you may notice, which is quite obvious, is the fact that his fist hands, or just his hands in general, are very big, right? They don't seem to be the right size hands. I don't think these were meant to go for this figure. I feel like these fist hands are way too large, as well as his flight hands, which I actually might pop this off so you can see what I mean. It's really over large, which isn't normal for how hands are supposed to be, right? Those are some big hands. And they don't look right. They look really weird, and it doesn't feel like they were meant to go with this particular action figure. It's just like these hands were meant to go with some other action figure, whatever the heck that was supposed to be. But there you go. Overly large hands. You have these thick, muscular arms that go to a body sculpt that is really compressed, it's compact. In this case, it would have been better if the upper torso was a little bit wider so it can compensate with these arms. But as you can see, the entire body for the Superman just feels really small and compressed compared to how, you would draw a superhero character where they would have a more wider torso for the upper chest area, right? Because that's usually how they exaggerate the features of a superhero, but for this one, it's not that. And in his legs, the thighs and even the lower calf of his legs, they're just way too thick in terms of their muscular sculpt, that it also looks weird when it's used for this particular body buck here. So there's some weird proportioning that I'm noticing with this figure, and maybe it's just me. This is just like a nitpick that I have with this one. Maybe for you guys, you probably don't really care, but this is just not the Superman figure that you would use for your Justice League shelf. This particular head sculpt for Superman is very different. It's not exactly the Superman that I picture, right? It has a very different style, but in a sense, it works because you can treat the Superman as some sort of Elseworld story instead of, a main timeline Superman on your shelf. This is just one of those Elseworld Superman variants, which that's how I see this one. So, head sculpt is not bad for that sense, but it's not really the Superman head sculpt that, you know, that's recognizable. So, and then when it comes to his S emblem, I do like the fact that it is sculpted. There is a yellow and red, right? So that's pretty cool. And then for his belt down here, he does have the S emblem as well. So that's a really nice touch, which I do like. But the fact that the colors are just very dark, it is interesting, right? Like, I know it's based off the artwork, but at the same time, it's like, they have to do it this way? I don't know. So, and then for the cape, now this is what I'm not into, when it comes to these sort of soft plastic capes. I don't like where they're pre-sculpted in this sense, because sometimes if you're trying to do some sort of action pose with certain figures and their cape is like just pre-sculpted this way, it looks bad in some angles. So for this guy, most of the time, if you're going to be posing this guy on your shelf, you're not really going to have him in some sort of crazy action pose, because the cape really does limit how that looks. In most cases, he's probably going to be in some sort of hovering pose where he's like hovering in the sky. That's basically what this cape mold is supposed to be. Like he's flying or something, right? Which isn't great, because if you're trying to do some sort of like pose where he's punching somebody, you're not going to have that sense of like impact because of just how weird this is sculpted and it looks, and it doesn't fit the whole, sort of pose that you're trying to go for. So that is quite unfortunate, which, I don't like this. But of course, if you are someone that knows how to customize your figures, you could probably replace this cape with a cloth wired cape if you know how to do all that, because I've seen people, take these plastic capes off and just add a new cape to their figure entirely. So that's another thing that you can do in the realms of customs. But that's pretty much it when it comes to aesthetics for this Superman figure. It's very simple looking, and some of these parts have been reused in the past. They're not new. So, it just looks like what they did here is that they took, the arms from like previous Superman figures, including the legs, and just plopped it to this body buck that is not something they've used before, and then just called it a day, which I don't think it works in this sense. So, in terms of execution, this is a poorly executed Superman figure. But nevertheless, I still got this figure mainly because there are some parts of it that just looks okay to me, where I'm like, it does look fine. It will go good on my shelf when it comes to the Superman side of things. But, this is something you just have to be aware of when you buy this figure, because it's still available, I think, right now, even after all these years, and it's not a bad looking Superman. It's just something that you have to just be like, okay, if you don't care about the proportions, you just like the way it looks because of the colors, and you just want to complete this wave if you're someone that wants to complete a wave, it is not a bad Superman figure in that sense. So this is where we talk about the articulation now, because I think for the articulation, the Superman is decent in that sense. So let's start with the head sculpt as I zoom out. So he can look up. So if you're going to get him to fly, he can definitely do that. He can look down, not exactly, just like, what's his name? Batman. He cannot look down for some reason. The neck area is just not sculpted for him to look down. So he can turn his head left and right. He can tilt his head side to side, no problems. So there's that. So the articulation for the head sculpt is decent. For his arms, he can go up this far when it comes to spreading upward. He can swing his arms out this way. Swinging back, not exactly a 360 because this cape is going to get in the way. He does have bicep swivels. He also has the double jointed in the arms. He also has the swivel in the hands and, of course, wrist articulation. So there is the arm articulation. For his torso, he does have rotation. And similar to my Batman figure, I did not heat up this figure, so I haven't loosened some of the stiffness on this guy, but I think that upper torso should be able to rotate better if you do use a hair dryer to pretty much loosen it. For his waist area, it does rotate as well. Pretty good. Leaning forward, you're not going to get much leaning forward with the waist part, but for the torso up here, he can lean forward a little bit. Not the best, but it still works. Leaning back, you can get him to lean back pretty good. But as you can see, there's a little bit of a gappage right there. So it does look kind of weird. And for his legs, he can spread them out this much. So that's pretty decent, I would say. Yeah, so there's that. When it comes to kicking forward, now this is where this is a problem. So with Batman, I was very surprised that his legs can kick out further. So let me just bring Batman back in, for example, right? So as you can see, with his waist area, his legs are not hindered by it for some reason. So that's actually surprising. But for Superman here, you have a bit of a problem where these trunks are restricting his legs from kicking any further than this. So that is not good right there. He does have the double jointed in the legs. He also has the articulation in the feet as well as swivel and toe articulation. And for the upper thigh swivels, they don't work on this figure either. They're like really stiff. So yeah, it's really weird how sometimes the thigh swivels will work for certain figures and sometimes it doesn't work for others. And that's pretty much all the articulation for this guy. You can get him into some flight poses. You can get him into some action poses. But remember, there are certain parts that are hindered. And of course, with the sculpting of this cape, you might not like certain action poses because of the fact that the cape doesn't look right for certain situations, depending on what you're posing him in when it comes to action poses, right? So, yeah, not great. Okay, that is going to do for the articulation for this figure. Let's move on to some comparisons. And I need to grab the other Superman figure over here because I forgot to grab him over for this review. So give me a second. There we go. Okay, I got him. Because this is the comparison I want to start off with first, is having the Silver Age Superman next to this guy. Because I did not compare him with the Silver Age Superman when I did the review for that Superman figure, so let's do that now. All right, here he is with the Silver Age Superman, as I set him right there. Hopefully he doesn't fall. Okay, we're good. He does not fall. All right, so as you can see, there is a clear difference between these two figures in terms of their colors, right? The Silver Age Superman is very bright and vibrant with the blues, the reds, and the yellows. And then for the Page Puncher Superman here, he has the opposite of that. And also, when it comes to the height scaling, the Silver Age Superman uses the body buck that I think is the superior Superman body buck from Mcfarlane Toys. As of all the other Supermans that Mcfarlane Toys has released in the past with different body bucks, they have been constantly experimenting, and none of them have worked to what they wanted it to be. And I feel like the problem with that is mainly because Mcfarlane loves making more Batman figures than Superman figures, right? If you look at the amount of Superman figures we have compared to the Batmans, I think there's more Batmans than Supermans. So, you know, when Batman got all the nice upgraded body bucks, Superman didn't get any of that. So, you know, after all these years, we finally have a Superman that actually is in scale. And at the time when this Superman figure came out, I was really hoping that he would be taller because he had a different body. He wasn't reusing the infected Superman body buck. He was using something different. But it turns out that that was not the case. He still had the scaling issue. So as you can see with these two side by side, you know which Superman is more superior in this sense. But if you're just looking at these two Supermans as like different figures and different looks, yeah, they go good next to each other if you want to have them on your shelf, but the colors are quite the opposite of each other. So there is this comparison to start off with. And for two other comparisons, before I bring in the rest of his wave mates from this wave, here he is next to the Knuckles from Sonic 3. And as you can see, he is taller than Knuckles. And in terms of a human companion for a Sonic character, I think the scaling is, pretty accurate here. So not too bad. And here is the Transformer Deluxe class Shadow Striker next to Superman. And of course, this scaling is inaccurate, but as you can see, a DC Multiverse figure is taller than a Transformer Deluxe class, so there is that. And finally, let's bring in all the other figures from this wave, and let me just get them set up on a flight stand so we can utilize this flight stand, which is pretty cool. And then I'll bring in the rest of the figures. So let me just get them into a pose. So as you can see, with the way that the cape is sculpted, you're probably going to have him posed in this sense where he's just hovering or something. Because that's usually how I have them displayed on my shelf with the Superman figures of other versions. I always just have them like displayed like this because, this sort of cape is not the funnest in terms of sculpt. So, all right. There we go. Let's have them right there in the center. And let's bring in Black Adam on this side. Constantine in the middle. Hopefully he doesn't block Superman. I think he's kind of blocking Superman. Okay, let's just put him right there. Actually, you know what? We'll put Batman in the middle. Let's just rearrange this. Let's just have Batman in the middle right here, right? And then Constantine on this side. There we go. Okay, this looks a little bit better. Well, there you have it. There is the entire wave displayed together from this Page Puncher wave. This was the first Page Puncher wave from Mcfarlane Toys. And, after all these years, looking back at these figures, they're still pretty fun to have in my collection, right? Like, despite the fact that this Superman is not my favorite of Superman figures, I still love the Superman figure for fitting in with these three other figures from this wave, and you can tell that it fits the theme of this wave, right? With the color choices that they chose for each of these characters' designs. And that's one thing that I love about the Page Puncher line from Mcfarlane Toys with the 7-inch scale ones is that they're all themed with a certain focus, right? Like you look at the Flash wave, which we will be looking at in the future. That's all very oriented to a certain theme with the designs of the characters and everything, right? So this is the one strong point about the Page Punchers line is that they stay in focus to a theme that they are centered on. And in this case, the other thing I liked about this first wave is the fact that this wave also gave us versions of characters that, we wanted. For example, Black Adam. This is a better Black Adam comic book figure than the previous Endless Winter Black Adam, in my opinion, because that one doesn't really look like Black Adam to me. And then also, when it comes to building your Justice League Dark Shelf, which, we still haven't been able to complete yet, this was the wave that offered us a John Constantine figure, which I've been wanting for a long time. I didn't even know at the time when we would ever get a John Constantine, and then this wave dropped, and I was like, wow, finally, John Constantine makes his way into the DC Multiverse line. So, well, you can say that this is not DC Multiverse, but they are the same exact figures like DC Multiverse, right? It's just a different name. So, point is, we got figures that we wanted for our shelves, right? Now, in terms of the Batman and the Superman figure, yeah, I mean, if you're not crazy about getting every single version of Batman and Superman, you don't really need these two. But, that's the fun thing about this first wave is that because all the comic book issues were the same, you don't have to buy every single figure from this wave. You could just buy John Constantine and just call it a day, right? So that is the only good element of this wave is that because the comic books were exactly the same, you don't need the entire wave. So, but for me, since I am a avid collector, or not, Is avid the right word? No, because I collect DC Multiverse from Mcfarlane Toys as my primary line, of course I want to complete this wave regardless of the reasons. Regardless if I have, multiple versions of Batman and Superman. That's just how I roll. So, alright. With all that said, if you found today's review of this Superman and just the entire look of this wave after all these years, looking back at this particular Page Puncher wave, informative, do give this video a like. If you want to subscribe to the channel for more action figure content and whatever else I do on here, it would be much appreciated. And also, if you want to check back on the other reviews I've already done for Black Adam, Batman, and John Constantine, you can do that as well. It's up on the channel. And with that said, take care, and I will see you in the next video.